All right. Good morning, everyone that is joining, or maybe will be joining, or will be listening to our chat, our talk in this snowy Mother's Day Sunday morning. Before I start, I would like to wish uh, happy Mother's Day for all moms. Um, I wish all the moms a day blessed with love and with all the best wishes for moms in this special day. All right, so before we start today, I'd like to do a quick announcement or invitation uh, for you to join our general meeting. Sorry, I think I got the wrong picture. It's not the extra meeting, but the general meeting for FSS that will be happening May 30th at noon. So I'd like to invite everyone to join us. It will be after our regular talks on Sunday. And we'll discuss and we'll talk a little bit about what we have for in the future, or what is happening with our work, and your participation, your inputs are super valuable and very important to us. So again, May 30th, and we'll be hosting the meeting over Zoom. Okay, so to start, I would like to read text. Where is my text? Let me just close this, go here, here. Okay, so the text today is from Living Spring, or Fonte Viva, from our dear Chico Xavier by our dear Spirito Emmanuel. And the text number is 178, and the title is Reverence and Compassion. Let us serve God joyfully with reverence and compassion. Paul, the letter to Hebrews, chapter 12, versicle 28. Let us serve God joyfully, says the apostle, but he does not forget to emphasize that the way we should serve him. We are not to spread sadness in our endeavors for the good. All the elements of nature obey the laws of the Lord, revealing joy. The constellation shines at night. The sun pours forth its hot heat and light. The earth is covered with flowers and greenery. The spring has its peculiar tune. The birds sings its songs of praise. Therefore, it would not be right to bring pessimism and bitterness to the service the Master has prepared for us. The contentment of helping is one of the signs of our faith. Nevertheless, our joy must not be excessive, neither inappropriate noise making, nor improper concepts, neither unworthy speech, nor boisterous laughter that may suggest sarcasm and disdain. Let us serve joyfully with reverence and compassion. Reverence towards the Lord, compassion towards our neighbor. You cannot personalize the All Merciful in order to please Him, but we can serve Him daily in the person of our brothers and sisters in the daily struggle. Thus, let us drive the car of our service on the road of respect and charity, and we will find the joy that can never be extinguished. All right, so let's close our eyes, and with this beautiful text about compassion and about the importance of us serving the Lord with reverence and compassion, let's continue our mental connection, our thought connection from our sentiment to the divine sentiment with our Father God and our Master Jesus. And first, let be grateful for one more opportunity that we have in the Sunday morning to learn more, a little bit more about the Lord's and our Father's teachings. Be grateful for this second home that is FSS for us, this loving home that helps us identifying, knowing, understanding the teachings in the light of Spiritism, and how those understanding and knowledge can help us in our journey for our betterment, and most importantly, our moral betterment. Let's ask for our guardian angels, the spiritual team of FSS, to guide us one more morning, to help us to have another blessed talk, to help us to have another enlightening moment with all our neighbors and our members, to take the best, to take the most important pieces of knowledge to apply in our daily lives. So be it. All right. Uh, So today, as I start sharing my screen, we will talk about how have you been exercising compassion when practicing charity? So last Monday, if I'm not mistaken, Sonia brought some in-depth knowledge about what does that mean. What does charity mean? So today I thought I would bring, in addition to the understanding of charity, but what is the role of compassion in practicing charity? Is it required to have compassion when we practice charity? What is the relationship of this another so important virtue when I am practicing and exercising charity? So that's kind of the topic for today: compassion, focus on the practice of charity. Uh, Not references, but our references. So the material that I use to prepare this talk, which is a talk that we already gave in Portuguese, and today we'll be doing in English, is from our dear Artur Valadares. There is a talk about compassion on the NAP YouTube channel. Of course, we're using gospel according to Spiritism. And when Artur uses or he made all the reflections about compassion, he uses a text called Be Compassionate, or Ser Compassivo, a book from Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira. And this the book has a variety of texts, and the text about compassion is by the spirit Kai Bar. And we'll also be using three other books called Book of Hope. The text is Compassion and Relief, Livro da Esperança, Compaixão e Socorro, by the Spirit Emmanuel from Chico Xavier. Also, Livro Refúgio, Receita de Luz, or Refuge, Recipe for Light, by the Spirit Emmanuel as well. And Jesus no Lar, Mensagem de Compaixão, or Jesus in the Home, the Message of Compassion. And this is by the Spirit Neo Lúcio. So what are some of the objectives for today? So hopefully by noon, we'll be able to increase a little bit, or be exposed at least to a little bit of more knowledge in terms of what is the importance of compassion in the practice of charity. What is our understanding? How do we define compassion? And the definition I would like to bring a little bit from like dictionaries, or I actually will bring a definition by Wikipedia, which caught me by surprise, the way that compassion is described there. and also what the gospel according to Spiritism talks about compassion. And as I mentioned in the references, what are those components of compassion? What are those components of compassion within charity in the light of Spiritism? How do they relate? And how do we exercise? How can we exercise compassion? What are our situations in life that we are invited to practice compassion? And even though a lot of the texts will bring the compassion towards our neighbor, or the same way that the same attitudes or approaches that the Jesus teachings guide us on how to behave in contrast or towards our neighbor, the same rules, let's say, apply when we are invited to exercise compassion and charity within us. So those are kind of, hopefully we'll be able to bring a little bit of more knowledge in those three questions. So as we were talking about compassion, and the focus for this morning is compassion within charity, I thought I would bring a first sentence from that Arthur uses in his talk to talk about compassion. That is from the Spirit Kaibar, when he mentions about the text, "Be compassionate." Kaibar starts with this very assertive and very clear first sentence where he says, "Without compassion, there is no charity." And this is from the book Spirit of Truth, chapter 96. By the way, for those who would like to know a little bit more, Chico Xavier, he wrote a series of books that reflect on each of the books of Spiritism. For example, the Spirit of Truth, it talks and reflects more about the gospel according to Spiritism. There are four more books that another book will talk more about the Spirit's book, another book will talk more about the Medium's book, and Heaven and Hell, and the Genesis. So it's in my to-do list to deep dive a little bit more on those and learn a little bit more some of the reflections from the spirits about the 5 books from the Spiritist doctrine. So, but here, Kaibar mentions about the importance and he's being very assertive that without compassion, there's no charity. And we know, as Sonia mentioned last Monday, and as we know, if we open the Gospel according to Spiritism, right in the middle, right, at chapter 15, we will see that there is this maxim, right? Without charity, there's no salvation. So charity is that key, that cornerstone, that that motto, if we want to call that, from Spiritism, that in order for us to comply or to follow the divine rules, the charity is a key cornerstone. And here, Kaibar guides us that in order to reach that, if that is the cornerstone, what is required for us, it's important to practice compassion. So we see that this virtue, we're not putting this virtue as the most important, but we are just shining a light on how important this virtue is for this key cornerstone of Spiritism. So if we want to work towards and put all the efforts toward practicing charity, here is a key virtue that we are invited to be mindful and to pay attention. So we are really practicing the real charity according to Jesus. So let's start a little bit with a little bit of definitions. So as Sonia mentioned, and as we know, what is charity? So question 886, what is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood it? And the Spirit's answer: benevolence towards everyone, indulgence towards the imperfections of others, and forgiveness for offenses. So those are kind of the three key elements that Jesus guide us in order for us to real practice charity in its full spectrum, in its full conception. Not It is required for us to develop those three pieces of benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness. And we will see as we move along this talk and towards the end, where we are going to use two passages or two or extractions from the message of compassion from the book Jesus in the Home. We'll see the importance of those indulgence and the key of forgiveness when we are invited or when we are put in the situations that we are invited to practice those two virtues, indulgence and forgiveness, towards our neighbor. And as I mentioned, the same way that we apply towards our neighbor, we are invited to apply within ourselves. So if we want to just put for us, we can understand charity is our kind of our goal, our place to work towards. And now we understand more what is charity. So, and the Spirit Kai Bai said that in order for us to achieve that goal, we are invited to practice compassion. What is compassion? So I want to bring first this this definition that is from the Wikipedia. It's not yet, and we will complement the definition of compassion by the Gospel according to Spiritism. But I thought this description or definition was very much aligned and gives us some key components of this important virtue. So Wikipedia defines that compassion can be described as an understanding of another person's emotional state. So I wanted to highlight the word understanding because this is so very much aligned to what Emmanuel talked about of two key components of when practicing compassion, which is understanding, or we can also use the word comprehension, as us understanding what I am feeling and understanding what the other is feeling. And Wikipedia continues, compassion is often characterized by actions when a person acting in a spirit of compassion seeks to help those for whom he has compassion. And here it seems that Emmanuel influenced whoever wrote this, this definition from Wikipedia, because that talks about another component that Emmanuel brings us that is about the relief. So compassion starts with the understanding of my feelings and my neighbor's feelings, and the relief, the help that I am invited to put into action towards myself or towards my neighbor. And Wikipedia concludes on, to have compassion is to remain in a positive emotional state while trying to understand the other without invading, however, his or her space. Here, another key component, and we are going to see where or how compassion is born by when we read a passage according to Spiritism, because compassion is born in most of the time in a state of melancholy. It is in a state that it starts a little bit sad. And there's a reason for it that we are going to talk about. However, it's so important for us to keep and remain in that positive emotional state. And here I always want to emphasize, and I always remember when Emmanuel in the book Thought and Life talks about faith. And when he talks about faith, he says that we will not be able, I'm just trying to remember, it's not the exact words, but the key message is, we will not be able to accomplish anything or make progress towards a better state if we don't keep our positive positivity as in the center, as a focus. So the importance of positivity and being careful when we find ourselves in a state of pessimism. And as when I talked about, I think last week about Bartolomeo, right? Bartolomeo is a great example for us to follow when Bartolomeo was feeling always sad. So it's important that when we are, it's okay that we recognize when we are sad or we are in a sadness state, but what can we do? What are the actions? And here we can even use an example. How can I be compassionate with myself, and takes the action to see what is happening, what is causing that sadness, so I can switch that mindset. So here, I thought that that definition, it really aligned with the context that we will be talking today throughout this talk, and it was really it touched in those three key points of understanding, action for relief, and also that positivity. So another thing that I would like to bring is Artur, with all his wealth of knowledge, he makes a very important and very tangible explanation of the word compassion. So he brings that compassion comes from a Greek word, and the Greek word is pathos. And that pathos means it's sentiment, it's our feeling, it's a sentiment of passion, is an expression of feelings within our heart. It's that sentiment of passion within our heart, and I feel something towards someone else or with myself. It's that creation of a bond. It's that connection, that bond with another one. And that when we bond with another one, we start understanding his or her feelings and what is him or her is experiencing something with. And that connection is created within ourselves and within each other. So I thought that that explanation of bonding, that explanation about the bonding of understanding and feeling uh, uh, amongst two or three or how many individuals are in the situation, and that creating that bond between those hearts, it's Luis creating a connection with Luis himself, or Luis creating a connection with someone else. And Artur here starts defining when we start practicing the compassion and we start creating that bond. It's that bond which he calls as a pipeline. It's that bond that he calls maybe a duct or even a bridge between those two hearts. Is because of that bond allows the flow of sentiment or feelings of love and charity to flow within myself or within another person. So here is a tangible explanation that Artur gave us, that it's towards that, it's because of that pipeline enables that flow of love and charity. And it's within, if we don't have that pipeline or we don't have that bond, it's kind of, we're missing a link, we're missing a connection, and therefore it's not possible for us to practice the real charity. So I thought that explanation really drove the point, or really made me understand in a more tangible way why compassion is very much related to charity. But what does the gospel according to Spiritism talks about or explains or helps us to understand more about compassion and charity? So in chapter, I have here chapter 13, item 17. It's actually, when we read that in Portuguese, the name of the text is called pity. However, when I read the English version, it starts with compassion. So there is this kind of translation piece where the Portuguese call pity, and we know that there is a misunderstanding of the word pity with the true word or what we or Jesus taught us when understanding real pity and real compassion. However, the text says, compassion is the virtue that brings you closer to the angels. It is the sister of charity, which leads you to God. Compassion is the melancholic but celestial precursor, or what comes before, of charity. So here, the Spirit Kaibar elaborating on this passage from the Gospel according to Spiritism and explaining us or explaining to us the importance. And here, the interesting part is this compassion being born in a situation of melancholy. But even though the compassion is born in that melancholic situation, is this celestial precursor. So let's understand a little bit what he means. Why is it born in this melancholic state? As we know, most of the times when we feel compassion towards ourselves, or we are practicing feeling compassion towards ourselves or towards our neighbor, it is born next to a little bit of pain, right? Or when we are facing some of our challenges or some of our struggles, or what Kardec or Kardec uses the word the vicissitudes, right? Most of the time, it is in that state. It is in that moment that compassion starts to be born. However, even though it is in that state, it is celestial because it's through, as we know, God is perfect and God has his divine wisdom and his divine resource, that it is in that moment, it is because of that moment that we are a little bit more fragile, and we are maybe a little bit more con- connected, because it's a situation that really touches us, that really made us reflect. And it's because of that situation that the divine wisdom and the divine resources from God's, that it's how the doors of our heart becomes more enabled, or become it might make it makes a little bit easier for the doors of our heart to be open for the divine resources, and start building that conduit and start building that bridge, or that of or that pipeline, so that the divine resource can flow through myself, within myself, or can be that conduit to flow towards our neighbor. It's that moment that we feel more, we care more, or it's that divine tenderness that finds in us an instrument here in this world, so God can act in this world throughout us. So it is in that moment that we are prepared. It is in that moment of melancholy that we feel more. There is a word in English that I can't find at this point, but it is that moment that we are more enabled, so we can be an instrument of God. We can be, and we can be used as an instrument of God, and we can build that bridge, and we can build that pipeline towards the other, or towards ourselves. So it is important that it starts and it emerges and is born in maybe in a more challenged moment, so we are better prepared to build that connection and that conduit. And that's how Arthur describe compassion as a pipeline that takes the living spring, all that divine resource and wisdom and love and justice and charity. It takes that living spring of charity and love towards ourselves and towards the hearts of our brothers. So compassion prepares the way, as I mentioned, creates the bridge, creates the pipeline to connect our hearts so the living water of charity and love can flow. And what is one of the key aspects of the Jesus words or teachings and the Spiritism? So it can flow and also start comforting. It's that balm, it's that consoling mechanism that God has given this earth and the whole universe, whatever the definition of the universe we can use. It's that mechanism, it's that divine mercy, it's that law of justice, charity, and love. And that's a true mechanism that is up to us. We are invited to build that every single day towards ourselves and towards our neighbor. So I really appreciate Artur making this comparison and this analogy of building this pipeline, of building this bridge, and the way of building this bridge to to fulfill the definition of charity is through compassion. So after this explanation about compassion in this pipeline, I'd like to bring one reflection. So for all of us to reflect today, tomorrow, or any day, what have been my efforts to build, maintain, or even increase our pipeline of compassion for the true realization of charity? What is the work that I'm doing to keep building and to keep expanding, or maybe at this time maintaining the pipeline between within ourselves and towards other for a true practice of charity? So as now that we define and we have more knowledge in terms of charity, when charity is born, why charity is important, let's see a little bit of compassion and action. So this two components of compassion itself and the relief that is an invitation for us to take the step forward. So Emmanuel, in the book Livro da Esperança, the Book of Hope, explains that the role of compassion is to understand, is that comprehension of what I am feeling or what I am going through, but also in the realm or the context of compassion, there is this call for relief. And why there is this call for relief? Because the function of relief is to restore myself, is to restore someone else that I'm invited to build that pipeline. So here there is this call for going one step forward other than just understanding, but also taking taking action. So in the same book, Emmanuel mentions that as we go through our learning experience here in our lives, right? There is this call for us, this invitation to practice the apprentice feelings. It is so much required, this compassion and relief, instead of beating or blaming. So here, this key concept of understanding, and there is a text in I think Pão Nosso, Our Daily Bread, where Chico, through the Spirit Emmanuel, mentions there is a text about compassion, and he advises us to reflect if we are doing something towards other or ourselves, but we have the buts or the howevers. It's like, oh, I will help this person, however, this person is not good, or I will help someone else. But so when practicing compassion, the importance is the comprehension and understanding, and not just the blame, and not highlighting the challenges or the difficulties of ourselves, or our neighbor. And he says that there's no point in vibrating compassion without finding ways to materialize in ourselves, materialize actions or materialize things that will provide that relief, that will help restore ourselves or the other. But those actions can be both material or moral, right? Those actions can be, if we take, for example, the parable of Good Samaritan, right? So when the Good Samaritan found the man laying down on the floor, so first, if we take the moral aspect, he didn't question, or he didn't know that person. However, the Good Samaritan took that person, put him in the back of his horse, if I'm not mistaken. And also the Good Samaritan took that person to the inn, to the place that person could restore himself. So here, the Good Samaritan gives us a great example of not judging the Good Samaritan. He not judging the person that was beaten, or the person that was ill. He mobilized his own fraternity, his own charity, and his indulgence towards that person. And also, he used, in his capacity or whatever was able to him, his material resources to help that person. So in sometimes the moral peace, the compassion and relief in sometimes we won't be able to do anything, for example, concrete, let's say, in the moral aspect. Sometimes silence, as we're going to see a little bit later, silence might be the best action that we can take. And silence plus prayer will be the key relief and the key actions that we can take in terms of the moral aspect of that relief. However, another point that I would like to bring is sometimes we confuse ourselves with, in the moral aspect, when we silent, is that compassion is not to applaud or just be in agreement, always in agreement, even though there is something that was done wrong. So there's a word, connivencia or connivance in English. We should not be connive towards something that has been done wrong, right? So when it's a yes, yes, or no, no. If something has been done in the wrong way, it is important that compassion is not just to be passive and not say anything, even though something was done in a wrong way. So important to establish that distinction between what was done wrong and we are just passive and we won't say anything. So it's just a call for us to be aware of that piece as well. So here talk about compassion and action. And another piece of compassion and action from the book Refugio, Refugee, Recipe for Light. So Emmanuel compares, compassion is a recipe for light for the soul to ascend to the divine realms. However, it somehow resembles a medical prescription in relation to health. For it to reach the precise effects in ourselves, it is not enough if it is recorded safely and accurately only in our feelings. We must be willing to use it. Really appreciate the comparison that Emmanuel brings here. It's like a recipe. If you go to the doctor says, take this. We need to take action by the medicine so we can see the results, right? So the same way here, compassion, it doesn't provide, or it doesn't have the results that it's supposed to have if it's just in our thoughts. It starts in our thoughts. Everything starts in our thoughts. However, we need to translate those thoughts into action, into something towards ourselves or towards the other, like medical prescription. If we don't take the medicine, we won't be able to heal, or we won't be able to reduce the impact and resolve the problem that we have with our health. So again, another call for us to take that relief, to take that restoration component of compassion. And here, as we talk about compassion and action, I would like to bring another reflection. How many of our feelings of compassion have become tangibly helpful to us and to others? How many times we prescribed ourselves the the medicine of compassion, and we did something for ourselves to put that compassion into action, and also towards others. So another key reflection for each one of us to think about it. And what about exercising compassion? So here I like to bring one message from our beloved Paul. Rather train it when he sent the letters to first letter of Timothy, chapter 4, verse 7. Rather train yourself for goodliness. And goodliness is another word when we talk about piedade or compassion. Goodliness is another translation in English for piedade. So Emmanuel, he is so, you can see as we read more, you can see Emmanuel's characteristics, right? And Emmanuel is so assertive in sending the message that in order for us to achieve something, when I read about habit, there's no way for us to achieve that if we don't exercise. And here, Emmanuel is shining light in the law of work, right? And the law of progress and the law of merit. If we are required to train ourselves in compassion or in godliness, it is imperative that we exercise it, and we exercise our understanding. It's our comprehension towards other and towards us. And in order to do that, we are invited to make those efforts, to put that front and center with it's in compassion, or it's in patience, and it's in any virtue. If we don't exercise, if we don't know about that, it would take a longer route for us to be able to really make that as a habit, or to make that as a second nature. So we don't even think about anymore. If we remember the mental house, if compassion is in our roof, that's our divine goals and what is the superior goals that we would like to achieve. If that compassion is always calling to us, it's important to bring up to our own present and to our lives, so we can practice, so we can use our will, and we can use all our strength to put the effort towards to do it. And I believe here there's another invitation, because in order for us to practice anything, we need to start practicing within ourselves, right? So there's this big invitation to look deeply in ourselves. And as we look into ourselves, it even makes the path a little bit easier to see ourselves and how others are feeling. If I am feeling that way and understand that feeling, and if I see my neighbor feeling, I can build that, or even that empathy or that compassion, right? And as we navigate that journey, that inner journey, we start seeing our own challenges, right? The challenges so we can overcome, and we can I think the word that we use a lot is to kind of control and dominate all the challenges of this world that is pride and selfishness. And here, as now that we're going to move towards 2 examples of practicing compassion towards other, it's important, and Saulo, that is a person that has a lot of understanding from Emmanuel, he brings a very good point that sometimes it's easier to practice compassion with someone that was a victim of another act. Someone caused something or did something towards someone else, and that someone else felt bad or was a victim of that action. So it's easier to practice compassion towards that victim. However, there's a big invitation to exercise the same compassion to the one that committed that act that resulted in a damage, or that act that was not aligned with the laws of loving, justice, and charitable. So the same way that we practice that compassion towards the victim, we are also invited to practice the compassion with the person that committed not so good action. So let's see some 2 examples. So this is the message of compassion that is from Jesus in the Home. And so this, it's again, so interesting to see the apostles talking to Jesus and asking some questions that they're so relevant to more than 2,000 years ago, and they are even more relevant right now with the world that we are living in. So here, James, son of Zebedee, asked Jesus how to act before the one who attacks us brutally. So how do we act on that? And Jesus says, a man who is driven by violence emphasizes Christ kindly. And you see, and it's beautiful how Neo, Lucio, and most of the spirits describe the behaviors and attitudes of Christ. So emphasize Christ kindly. That man must be mad or poison. Let us help him recover. So again, that person that attacked, that person is in ignorance. It's in the state of ignorance, right? And the invitation here is to, again, Jesus never invited to just hit back, right? He never says, yeah, you just do the same way that the other person did. It's about helping him recover. It's about that relief. And that relief, in this case, and most of the times on this brutal attack, it's not about talking or saying anything. It's about the silence, right? It's about the prayer. It's about us not entering the same state that the other person is in at this point or at that point due to ignorance, but it's us to silence and concentrate and at some point pray, because prayer is action. And pray for the guardian angels or whomever can help that person to find himself, to find and help that person maybe take steps towards getting out of that ignorance zone. And we know there's a lot of challenge. It's not a simple thing that we just do it, and it is required practice and practice and practice. Another question that they ask, Master, what about when our house is plagued by crime? How will I proceed before the one who betrays my trust, who dishonors my name, or bleeds my home? Look at here, it's even more intense, right? And the message, and Jesus said, have pity, in the right sense of pity, on the delinquent of any class, Jesus explained, and do not wish to violate the law that your neighbor disrespected, because the persecuted and the criminal of all situations carry a burning fire. One fault does not rescue another fault, and blood does not wash blood. Forgive and help. Time is in charge of giving back to each creature according to their effort. So here it's that call for us to move away from that vicious cycle and put our efforts towards a more virtual cycle. We cannot fix one mistake with another mistake. The divine laws, the law of cause and effect, and all the divine laws don't need us to be the judge, right? And as the Spiritism has been clarifying and helping us, there are infinite mechanisms for us and for anyone else to repair our mistakes. If I have done something here that is a mistake, I will have a consequence. The same way, if I have done something right, I will have a positive consequence. And it's not a punishment. The consequence is just to teach. It's a lesson, right? And those mechanisms that can go from, I don't know, us going through a financial difficulty, us going through a health difficulty. There's so many, right? Those are all the mechanisms that the divine laws and God in its perfection have put together. So we don't need to be the judge. We don't need to fix the mistake that someone caused or we did by creating another mistake. And another sentence and another piece of forgiveness, so important. And I can't remember now the name of the guy from Feb, that he mentioned that forgiveness, the way that he describes forgiveness is that we don't carry within us the sadness from others. It's not up to us. It's not the direction that we are invited to take. When someone causes sadness to us, forgiveness is for us not to carry that, right? It's just it's for that person to reflect on the mistaken, and for that person to go through the lessons in order to correct the course, right? And again, if we think about that definition from Wikipedia, to keep us in the positive state, even though the compassion is emerging and being originated in the melancholy, it's important for us to make sure that that sadness or whatever happens does not belong in that state for us, and for us to practice the forgiveness so we don't carry that. I thought that was really important distinction and explanation about forgiveness. And as we're moving towards the end, there is in that text or Spirit of Truth, Be Compassionate, he brings another piece of compassion that's saying, only consoling compassion brings joy to the spirit, creating elevation and value. Let us flee the apparent compassion that is manifested in crocodile tears, gestures, and pompous exclamations in the artificial scenarios of pretense. Commiseration is measured by the fraternal devotion and solicitude it promotes. So here, it's kind of a measure of compassion. So how do we know that we're really practicing compassion? So here, the Spirit Kaibar gives us a little bit of measurement. And he says that the right way, the way that Jesus has taught us, when he says commiseration, and commiseration is about practicing compassion, practicing goodliness, is measured when we do in a way that is devoted, that is fraternally devotion, and the solicitude it promotes. And as Jesus in one of his says that we don't analyze, or we not judge, or we see a tree by how beautiful the leaves are or the flowers are, but it's about the food. Because it's the fruits that provide food and that provide feeding and sustenance for us. And here I would like to bring a relationship or a reflection about when we are practicing compassion and consequently charity. It's about the law of adoration. Am I practicing compassion and the actions of my compassion are related to the devotions to God, to the devotions, to the divine laws. When I do this, am I doing just for my pride? Am I doing just for my selfishness? What are the fruits that I'm producing with my compassion? Am I aligned with the divine laws? So here a key measurement for us to make sure that we are in the path that Jesus has taught us. And towards the end, he says, towards the end of the text, he says, and with the certainty that sincere compassion never expresses cowardice to overthrow the good, nor ridiculous to excite the laughter of others, let us embrace it as a force for the renewal of souls and the interior light of true life eternalized by God. Be compassionate. And here I'd like to close with a piece from Arthur where he mentions that compassion requires courage, requires dedication, requires strong will to be compassionate in this world of indifference that we are, and especially now that we are living in, right? It requires that courage to really understand and see who is suffering and what is making us suffer. So it requires that attention from all of us to bring courage and dedication and strong will to put that into practice. And he brings another piece when we look at the parable of the Good Samaritan. When the Good Samaritan, it starts, the Good Samaritan was moved by compassion. So Arthur brings this kind of, the Good Samaritan, it seems that he was pushed by compassion. So he brings a reflection about this external influence. It was an external environment that led the Good Samaritan to take that action. So we are led to feel something. But who is this? Who leads us? Is this hidden agent who is God? Who is God? Who has mercy, where the compassion is born, is God with the heart of universe, is the source of all love, and he promotes this love inside of us and in the universe. So when we are moved by compassion, it's like God knocking on our door, and the door of each of our hearts asking, can I enter? Hey, Luis, there is an opportunity here. Can I use you to support you or someone else that is suffering? Can I use you to create this pipeline of compassion to bring the living spring of love and charity for you and for your neighbor? So the invitation here is, it is up to all of us to let the light in, to open the doors of true life in order to take that living water. Is to invitation to accept God's invitation to be an instrument of that love. And I'd like to finish with a message, or one of the last messages that Jesus in the cross said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. So that message, it is a beautiful message of compassion that Jesus left us. That message of compassion that sometimes we don't know yet what we are doing, right? So the invitation for us to keep our thoughts connected, to be that instrument of compassion and love from our Father. That's it. Let's see, I think there's no questions in anywhere, neither in YouTube or Zoom. All right, thank you very much, and I will end with our final prayer. So staying connected with the divine wisdom, with the divine resources, with the divine thought, connecting our thoughts to God, connecting our thoughts to Jesus, connecting our thoughts to our guardian angels and the spiritual team from FSS. Let us be grateful for one more opportunity that we had to learn about compassion, to learn about this virtue, which is so much required for us in order to practice Jesus' teachings and to practice the true charity. Let's be grateful once again for this house, this home of FSS that helps us in our evolution, in our journey here while incarnated. Let's ask God, the spiritual team, and our guardian angels to bless us and bless all the moms, all the mothers, and all over this world so that they can have a loving and serene day. And let us ask also so we can have an enlightening week, a week of love, a week of compassion, a week of patience, and a week of serenity. And let us be here tomorrow with one more talk about the Jesus teachings and a one more opportunity for us to keep our moral evolution and journey. So be it. Thank you, everyone.
So be it. Thank you, Luis, for the lovely reflections. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia.
Have a great day.
You too.